Today, we're looking at a commentary from the Storybox, urging Erica Kirk to take legal action against Candace Owens, and also dissecting Owens' claims about astral projection.
Right.
The author is, clearly furious, but that fury is really getting in the way. To turn this from a vent into a persuasive weapon, the rhetorical strategy needs to be refined, like right now.
I've gone through this, and you can feel the passion. It's like palpable. You can feel the heat coming off the page.
Totally.
But you're right. Heat doesn't always equal light, and it definitely doesn't always equal persuasion.
Exactly. So let's jump right into the first major hurdle. The effectiveness of a legal and moral argument is just, significantly diminished when the speaker relies on ad hominem attacks and derogatory slang.
This was the first thing that hit me. It's like a sledgehammer of insults right out of the gate.
Yeah.
We're seeing terms like deranged lunatic, psychopathic, dingbat nutjob, and this phrase, bury this bitch. Now, look, I get it. The writer's angry.
Of course.
They are defending a grieving widow. But when you use language like dingbat, you instantly lower your own status. You stop being a commentator and, you start sounding like an internet troll.
It's a credibility killer, right? If the goal is to call for legal flurries and restraining orders,
Serious things.
very serious adult consequences, you have to sound like the adult in the room to request them. If you're throwing around schoolyard taunts, you're just inviting the audience to see this as a catfight.
That's the risk, isn't it? You frame it as drama instead of danger. And I think it feels good to write dingbat. It feels cathartic to say, bury this bitch.
For sure.
But catharsis isn't persuasion. If I'm a neutral listener, or maybe even a soft supporter of Owens, and I hear psychopathic dingbat, I tune out. I think, okay, this person is just as volatile as the person they're criticizing.
Precisely. You lose the moral high ground the moment you start rolling around in the mud. So the improvement here is to sanitize the vocabulary.
Right.
We need to replace that invective with more clinical or descriptive language. Describe the behavior rather than labeling the person.
I love that distinction. Behavior, not person. So let's workshop this. Instead of saying, bury this bitch under a legal flurry, which sounds, vindictive and unprofessional.
A little unhinged?
Yeah. What if the speaker said, pursue the maximum legal recourse available to dismantle her platform?
That sounds authoritative. That sounds like a strategy, not just a threat.
Exactly, right? And the insults. Instead of psychopathic dingbat, look at what she's actually doing.
Mm-hmm.
Refer to a pattern of predatory behavior or a demonstrable lack of empathy. That hits harder because it's true. It's an observation, not just an opinion.
And the follower, the psychopath nutjobs?
Oh yeah, calling the audience names is never a winning strategy.
Never.
Instead, you could call them a radicalized following or an uncritical echo chamber.
Radicalized following sounds scary. Nutjobs just sounds like you're bitter. That shift in tone immediately adds weight to the whole argument.
It creates distance, right? It says, I am analyzing this toxicity from the outside, not I am part of it.
Right. So now, moving from the tone to the actual structure. The transition between discussing serious legal threats, like stalking, and these theological accusations about witchcraft, it needs a stronger logical bridge. It's disorienting.
This is a fascinating disconnect in the material. I was reading along, and we're talking about very grounded, scary things, restraining orders, people watching your every move.
It's like a legal thriller.
It is. And then, without even blinking, we pivot to claims that Owens is a witch who spoke about astral projection and third eyes.
It's a serious whiplash moment.
It is. And I worry about the average listener here. You go from, this woman is a stalker, to this woman is a wizard in like 10 seconds. It feels so abrupt.
It does.
It risks making the speaker look like they're engaging in, fringe conspiracy talk. You go from call a lawyer to she worships the devil. And for a secular or moderate listener, that just erodes credibility faster than the insults do.
It makes the speaker sound like they are operating in a different reality. But the point they're trying to make is valid, that these claims are bizarre.
Right.
So the suggestion isn't to cut it, but to frame it different. Frame the witchcraft claims not as theological facts, but as evidence of Owens' unreliability or her attempt to rewrite history.
That's the key. You have to secularize the argument. So instead of just saying Candace Owens is now a witch, which sounds hyperbolic
And unprovable.
totally unprovable, frame it as Owens is attempting to revisionist history by attributing esoteric beliefs like astral projection to Charlie Kirk, which contradicts his known public persona. Now you're not arguing theology. You're arguing that she's a liar.
That is a much stronger argument. Paints her as manipulative rather than, magical.
Exactly. And with the third eye stuff, instead of shouting about devil worship, use it to illustrate how she creates unfalsifiable narratives. She waits until Charlie is gone and then claims he had a third eye.
He can't deny it.
He can't deny it. That is a predatory tactic. It makes the argument about manipulation and exploitation of the dead. It grounds the spooky stuff in a logical framework of deceit.
It turns the supernatural into evidence of character. Okay, that brings us to the motivation, the financial motivation. The strongest argument regarding financial exploitation is, I think, just buried under all these emotional outbursts. It needs to be the central thesis.
This is the smoking gun. I was reading through and I kept waiting for them to just slam this point home, but they just graze it. The text mentions she's getting paid millions and running out of content, and even quotes her asking for tips. But it's treated like a side note. It's playing second fiddle to the dingbat insults.
It feels like the speaker is distracted by their own anger and is missing the strategic win.
100%. The financial motive is the engine driving this whole conflict. Why is she doing this? Is it because she's a lunatic? Maybe, but it's way more likely that it's because it pays.
Right.
The text mentions tips at Candace.com sarcastically, but it doesn't really explore the grift mechanic. If you can prove she is doing this for money, you dismantle her moral authority completely.
So the suggestion is to pull all those mentions of money and content generation into one cohesive section that just systematically proves the profit from tragedy angle?
Absolutely. It shouldn't be a footnote. It should be the headline. Imagine if the piece opened with the money. There's a specific quote in here. Guess what, guys? It's all because of you that I'm getting paid millions.
That's a confession.
It's a confession. The speaker should create a segment just analyzing that quote. Use it as the anchor for the entire critique. It changes the narrative from she's crazy to she's calculated.
Exactly.
And you connect the running out of content observation directly to the escalation. The speaker notes she's running dry. Well, what does a content creator do when they run dry? They manufacture drama.
Of course.
You argue that she must invent stalker-like scenarios or witchcraft stories to keep that revenue stream flowing. The argument becomes she isn't crazy. She is commercially incentivized to be cruel. That's a much harder argument for her defenders to dismiss,
A much harder argument. That structure turns a rant into an expose. It's investigative, not just react. Okay, now let's look at the delivery, specifically who the speaker is talking to. Directly addressing a public figure who is unlikely to be watching. It creates this parasocial dynamic that can really alienate the actual audience.
This is a huge pet peeve of mine. The speaker repeatedly talks directly to Erica Kirk. Things like, Erica, I don't think you're watching this, but if you are.
Right. Now is the time, Erica.
It just feels presumptuous. Maybe even a little melodramatic. It creates this white knight vibe where the host is positioning themselves as a self-appointed savior.
Yeah, an intimate advisor.
But the reality is, Erica Kirk probably isn't watching, and the audience knows she isn't watching. So when you spend your time leaving a voicemail for a celebrity, the actual listener just feels like they're intruding. It's awkward.
It lowers the host's status again. You go from being an analyst to being like a fan. The improvement is to shift the rhetorical stance from a letter to Erica to an advocacy for justice. Speak about the situation to the audience, not to the subject.
It changes the power dynamic completely. Instead of pleading, Erica, you need to get a restraining order, which sounds a bit desperate.
It does.
You state to the audience, the circumstances surrounding the alleged stalking suggest that a restraining order is the only logical next step for the Kirk family. You hear the difference?
Huge difference. One is advice, the other is analysis.
Exactly. Instead of, I hope and I pray that you are collecting all the information, you say, one would hope that legal counsel is currently aggregating these clips as evidence of targeted harassment. Now you sound like a legal commentator.
Yeah.
You are advocating for them, not talking at them. It dignifies the tragedy instead of exploiting it for some weird parasocial moment.
That's a crucial distinction. Dignifying the tragedy. Okay, last piece of the puzzle. The speaker tries to diagnose the antagonist as a narcissist, but armchair psychological diagnoses are just more effective when they're backed by specific behaviors, not broad generalizations.
The text really gets bogged down here. There's a whole section defining narcissism. The speaker says, narcissism is just pride personified, and if you are questioning whether or not you are a narcissist, you're not. It reads like a self-help sidebar.
It totally slows down the momentum. We don't need a dictionary definition.
We really don't. The risk is that you get into a semantic argument rather than an evidentiary one. If you have to explain what narcissism is, you aren't showing it clearly enough.
So the suggestion is to just cut the general definition. Instead, point to the specific behaviors in the text that demonstrate narcissism without having to use the clinical label over and over. Show, don't tell.
And the evidence is already staring us in the face. The speaker mentions that Owens makes Charlie's death about herself, that she claims to have spies everywhere watching Erica.
Which is terrifying behavior.
It's terrifying. Claiming you have spies watching a widow? That is classic narcissistic triangulation and paranoia. It's all about power.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a quote in the text. She picks apart every little single detail, even if it has nothing to do with Charlie's death. Highlight that. That's evidence of obsessive control. If you just list these actions, the spies, the centering, the obsession, the audience will scream narcissist for you. You don't need to lecture them.
Right. By focusing on the actions, you make the diagnosis undeniable, and you keep the pacing tight. No detours into Psychology 101.
Just hard evidence of bad behavior.
This has been a really comprehensive breakdown. We've taken a piece that was just full of righteous anger and tried to channel it into something more surgical. Let's recap the main action points.
Sure. First, sanitize the vocabulary. Get rid of dingbat, bitch, and nutjob. It destroys your standing as a serious critic.
Second, fix the bridge between the legal stuff and the esoteric.
Right. Use the witchcraft content as evidence of manipulation, not as a theological debate. Make it a character study of a liar.
Third, the money.
Center the financial incentive. Don't bury the lead. Structure the entire argument around the grift, not the madness.
Fourth, stop the voicemail.
Stop talking to Erica. Talk to the audience. Shift from a parasocial plea to professional advocacy.
And finally, show, don't tell with the diagnosis.
Cut the definition of narcissism, just highlight the spies and the obsession. Let the behavior speak for itself.
If the listener can implement these changes, this script goes from being a venting session to a formidable piece of commentary, something that could actually change minds.
And that's what we want, right? We want the passion to actually count for something.
We invite you to revise the script with these tonal shifts and submit the new version for a follow-up critique. We'd love to see if the argument lands with the authority we know it can have. Until next time.